Hi, I'm James Davis, founder and CEO of Touchdown Strategies, and welcome to Game Plan. Today, we have an exciting guest, Ori Reinhardt. There's a lot of conversation about influencers and influencer marketing, but this guy is a legend in this space, and his company bears that name, Urban Legend. Ori, thanks for coming to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's a lot to be made about influencer marketing, and it's kind of a buzzword. It gets thrown around. Some people understand more about it. Some people understand less about it. There's some sophistication that goes into the work, and most of it is like one-off influencer marketing campaigns. Touchdown has been very fortunate. We've been able to work with some big influencers, Shaggy, Snoop. We did an event with Kim Kardashian. We've done things with the NFL and NFL players. That's all really exciting, but those are one-off kind of engagements. I want you to take a second and tell us a little bit about Urban Legend, how you came up with the idea, and give us a little hint, like a kind of a breakdown of the platform.
Yeah. Well, you actually started in a really interesting place, which is to talk about people who would traditionally be considered celebrities. Celebrity endorsements aren't new. The influencer theory has been around for a while. What's different is that social platforms have enabled that to come to scale. And as opposed to just tapping into a celebrity for name ID, for brand recognition, for endorsement value, brands and organizations can now use influencers for their audience and their reach, that kind of built-in scale. And what we realized was that there is tremendous value in influencers, but just how much value in a given post really does depend on what the audience does next. And the theory of the case is if an advertising solution, any solution, Politico Playbook, the back page of the New York Times, the display ad you see on a website, an audio ad on Spotify, if it's so good, why wouldn't the person selling it to you guarantee results? And turns out the best influencers are willing to put skin in the game and willing to say, I'll give this a try. Pay me based on how well it works. And so what our platform does is let selected, vetted, invited influencers join campaigns not about products, but about issues and causes that they believe in, and pays them based on results. The advertisers, the brands, the organizations powering those campaigns similarly only pay for those results. And so it creates a system of accountability and scale that I think is missing in the larger advertising ecosystem. And when you think about it, every single advertising solution that's been out there has been followed some years or decades later by accountability. TV, followed by Nielsen rating, print and the audit boards, the internet and the IAB. And so there will be a moment where people start seeking accountability and measurement in the influencer space in a much more concrete way. We think this approach is ahead of that trend.
And so, like, you get into a great point here is the KPIs and how you're measuring the outputs that are provided. And just because I have a celebrity endorse or put out a TikTok video on my product or my campaign doesn't necessarily mean a good thing, right? I mean, sometimes we've seen these things backfire because the celebrity, the content creator, has not had or shared the same values as the broader consumer base. We saw that with Bud Light. We've seen it in a couple of different places. How does your platform kind of put a construct around that, to some guardrails for brand safety?
Yeah. Well, I think you mentioned Bud Light, but why would a celebrity or an influencer share something they know is not a good fit for their audience? The answer is because they got paid a lot of money up front and they had no skin in the game. And so by saying to these celebrities and influencers, only share things you believe in, and you're going to be incentivized based on how well it does, you eliminate any incentive for them to do something that is not a good fit. You're going to make them say no because it's not going to work. But then at scale, you're also able to, using platforms like us and other tools, filter and sort and categorize influencers based on the things they believe in, not just the verticals they operate in, but the issues that are important to them. And it's important to know that this is not always a fit. Sometimes a particular group wants to reach an audience that is just so not aligned with their mission, And that's not going to work in a case like this. You're not going to be able to get influencers who oppose you, to get audiences who oppose you, to take an action. That's a step too far for what should be a top of funnel channel primarily.
And so that's great because in your platform, which we've worked with quite a bit, you are only paying for the outputs, the results. So even if someone does decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to sign on to this campaign, if the results aren't there, the client pays nothing.
Right.
Like the post might be there, but the client pays nothing if there are no actions.
Right. And that could be a factor of mismatch in audience, but more likely it's the moment in the algorithm. The news cycle overtook your particular issue. Something else drew more attention. The post just wasn't that good. Or the post was so good that nobody actually took action because they were too drawn in by the post, or it wasn't relevant enough to drive people to take an action. And in all of those cases, the risk has shifted in our model from the organization, from the brand, from the sponsor, to the people who are actually creating the content and controlling the results where it belongs. But it's not to say that it's a shift only in one direction. There are, I think, really significant benefits to influencers when they're willing to put skin in the game and be held accountable. And in our model, those come in the form of flexibility. And traditionally, a brand deal for an influencer might take weeks of negotiations and contracts and set deliverables and submit your content for approval and do reshoots and over and over and over. Why? Because the brand just put a tremendous amount of money, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars, at risk and needs to control what happens next for fear of losing on that investment. Our model gives the advertisers the comfort to let go a little because their budget's not at risk. And so that then gives the influencer more creative control, which leads to more authentic content, which leads to better results.
I love that. I love the authenticness of the platform, and at the heart of it, you're really just a platform to match content creators with the issues and causes that they would normally support. And you've now given them a little extra incentive to say, okay, I'm going to carve out a little of my time to work on this.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Yeah.
You've disrupted the digital model. You've displaced advertising dollars for most of the major social networks. I don't think it hurts them in the long run because they get better content creators. They're getting more engagement. And that's awesome. It's just changes where the money comes in, right?
It does. And I think, a lot of times people ask, who are your competitors? It's not influencer marketing agencies. It's not firms. It's not consultants. It's social platforms and ad platforms. Our enemy is display ads because that is the most wasteful form of digital advertising. Our competitor is sponsoring a newsletter or running a social ad, running a pre-roll ad. What we're effectively saying is that message can be delivered more effectively and authentically, and we're willing to prove that. And if we're wrong, there's less to pay for.
So this is interesting because your background, you worked for a major media company doing marketing and helping set up some of these programs. And now you've sort of created this model that just turns it all on its head.
The Atlantic and Atlantic Media, where I worked for many years, was at the forefront of what was then called native advertising, before that advertorials, and realizing the same thing I'm saying now, which is traditional display ads don't work. More authenticity is needed. Content needs to be at the forefront. What didn't work about the native advertising era was the promised, let's call it trust transfer. Well, you ran in the Atlantic or you ran in Politico, so now you'll have that same level of trust we have as a publication. Never materialized. And these brand campaigns and advertorials were so easily skipped over because they were an out-of-place brand voice, often in a publication. And so what so many of these publications ended up having to do was buy traffic to make these campaigns look successful. And almost every major media company did this, right? They went to Outbrain and Taboola and these networks and loaded up cheap clicks into their content campaigns. And you can buy an audience, but that's not an audience that sticks around. It's not an audience that wants to be there. And it's not an Atlantic audience or a Politico audience or a New York Times audience. And so that trust transfer never happened. It's one of the reasons we don't allow our influencers to boost their posts. They're not allowed to put money behind their posts. They have to reach the audience they organically have.
So you talked about the trust transfer between media, which is an interesting concept because we're also in a time where our faith in institutions and society are pretty low across the board, and media has taken a heavy hit across the board. I mean, I had Phil Elliott from Time Magazine on, and we talked about it a bit. We talked about it a little with Amy Walter in a previous episode as well. The media outlets don't have the same level of trust anymore. Now, granted, there are people that flock to the New York Times and there are people that flock to the Wall Street Journal, and those are their chosen publications that they give more trust to. But that at large, like you're not looking at 75, 80% media trust. Mm-hmm. Whereas with the individual creator, the individual influencer, micro influencer, macro influencer, whatever it is, that trust is a little larger and the transfer seems to be
well, the trust is at 100% for the audience that chose to follow that influencer, believes in what that influencer says, and takes action because that influencer asked the audience to do so. That trust is much lower for someone who's never heard of the influencer. And so a lot of times, I think what goes wrong in influencer marketing is you find an influencer, you think that they can create good content, but you don't think through the audience side of it. What will the audience actually do? And then you try to take that creator's content and run it in a TV spot, for example, and it looks out of place. It's why celebrity endorsements only work for the portion of people who actually cared about that celebrity. And the audience aspect wasn't built into it. You talked about trust transfer, and I think what's really interesting about a lot of the things you mentioned in institutions and so on is that these influencers, what they're doing is they're making up for a lack of power in brand voices. And that lack of power comes from two things. The first is that there is a declining trust in institutions. Brands, organizations, publications, and media companies are often our clients, are finding it harder to break through on their own. And the nature of social platforms has built on that, right? It used to be that as a nonprofit, a C3, or a new media company, or a corporate Fortune 100 brand, you could build a Facebook page and grow that Facebook page to several 100,000 followers, let's say, over the course of a year or two, put out content and reach an audience. Those days are over. Organic reach is next to nothing on a lot of these platforms for brand pages. And so now they're being pulled into boosting and running ads on those platforms to make their mediocre corporate PR-ish content reach an audience. And then nothing happens. And the platforms, realizing nobody wants that content, have deprioritized it or demoted it in their algorithms. And that's not a social media bias thing, right? That's a listening to audience reaction thing. And so it's not working. And so then the question becomes, where do you find a way in that is trustworthy, that is authentic? And the answer is outside voices, surrogates, coalitions, influencers. I think the difference that we've kind of tapped into is the question of how valuable is it? That's based on what the audience actually did in response.
I love that. You actually conflated a few different ideas: influencers, coalitions, third-party voices, surrogates. Those are all terms that get thrown around quite a bit. And, I think, I've always said today's influencer, that's just a fancy new word for yesterday's surrogate. Right? Mm-hmm. That was the term. When I worked for Pentagon, I worked for Secretary Rumsfeld during the Iraq War. Tough time, obviously. I was catching a lot of incoming. Well, our team built an infrastructure to work with third-party experts where we would brief them in real time what's going on, how that's working, and what we saw from it was we created trust with the individuals that we were briefing because we were being very open. Mm-hmm. We were being very transparent. And then when the media called, we had a press conference, the media would then follow and they would say, okay, who are my experts? And the experts would say, I just got briefed by the Secretary of Defense. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs Staff just briefed me. David Petraeus just briefed me. Mm-hmm. And that created real credibility, so much so that we got hit. The David Barstow did a piece in the New York Times calling it the Pentagon's propaganda machine. Right. All it was is really effective communication because we were communicating transparently with everyone so that everyone had the same information, then they can decide how they'd interpret it and what their individual talking points are.
Yeah.
Because we were communicating with the right, the left, everyone across the board in that space. How do you avoid the pitfalls of, those kind of critiques within the influencer marketing space, particularly on a digital platform?
No secrecy. And that's the number one rule. We don't run secret campaigns. And we probably get 2 to 5 requests a week of somebody saying, hey, I really want to do this, but I don't want anybody to know I was the sponsor of this campaign. It doesn't work. In our app, when influencers log in, they see the logo and the name of the advertiser right away. They have to. They tell their audience who they're working with. They're linking to a client-owned landing page or destination or video. And secrecy backfires every time. I think there are a lot of people who aren't ready to step into influencer marketing for whatever reason. Usually it's nobody ever got fired for hiring McKinsey. Nobody ever got fired for buying Political Playbook.
Yeah.
And that's still the case, I think, in a lot of the advocacy space. But if you're not ready to not just have the campaign covered by media and talked about, but to put it out there yourself with pride, don't do it. Write the press release yourself. Brag about the influencer campaign, because secrecy always backfires, and because this is a really cool thing. Saying I am confident enough in my message and my brand and my mission to let other people carry it for me is a statement of power. And saying I'm going to sit here and control this so tightly myself because I'm afraid of what anybody might say is not coming from a position of strength.
I love it because it's sort of a bottom-up approach to advertising, really. You're just giving people the option to opt in to the campaign with, broad guardrails of like, this is what we're talking about. This is the issue that we're engaging on. And if you want to do it, jump in and do it. It creates just so much real communication and back and forth.
Going back to your surrogate example you gave from the Pentagon days, I think it's the exact same thing, right? It's we'll give you the information, do with it what you think you should. The difference is in today's era, the power of those surrogates has been diminished significantly. And the reason is that those surrogates never had an audience of their own. They were delivering their messages through media, audiences of which have dwindled, decline of print journalism, decline of media generally, decline of trust in media. And so the surrogates who are most impactful today are the ones who bring an audience with them.
Yeah. I mean, it's amazing. So I've typically used the word surrogate related to political campaigns, and those are people who are really towing the line for what whatever the campaign is. And so I intentionally didn't use that word in the Pentagon because we were communicating with everyone. Hillary Clinton was out there saying the surge of forces is a good idea at the end of the of our effort, right, to educate people on why we thought that was the next best step at the time. And so it was much broader than any kind of quote surrogate campaign, at least in the way I would portray it, and because I just think that word is negatively connotated. Tell me a little bit more though, like this influencer marketing mix that you have. How does it fix what's wrong with today's digital ecosystem, and where does it fall short of fixing those problems?
It doesn't fix it. The internet is the internet, and the internet will always be broken in its own ways.
TikToker's going to TikTok?
Sure. Your words, not mine. But yeah, it doesn't fix the internet, and we're not the solution to everything. And there are so many scenarios where influencer marketing doesn't work or our approach doesn't work, namely the ones where the organization and the influencer aren't mission aligned. And that's going to fall short, and we can't fix the fact that not everybody agrees with everybody else, nor do we want to, right? We're a platform for multiple sides of an issue, all sides of an issue, to reach the influencers they want to connect with and have those influencers carry their message and drive an audience to act. And so I wouldn't say that influencer marketing falls short, but it's not meant to be the solution for the challenges of a digital era, which are so wide-ranging and tie into issues of trust and issues of quality of content and authenticity and AI and inauthentic behavior and bot manipulation and all of those things that are especially problematic on a foreign policy level on a international scale, but increasingly are a problem also in the commercial space.
What are the biggest challenges that you see going forward for yourself? And this world of influencer marketing and just the digital ecosystem. Is it AI? Are you concerned about it? How do you embrace it?
Yeah, so we're not concerned about it. And I think the reason is that the power of our model is that it recognizes that content creators know their audience best and know the internet best. How many PR experts sit around trying to teach their clients how to go viral, right? How many people have sold a deck of "we will help you go viral"? You have no idea how to go viral, and neither do I. And the reason we don't is because we're not sitting there creating content as our jobs every single day, nonstop. But content creators, influencers are. And so they will be at the cutting edge of trends, and they'll be at the cutting edge of finding the tools they want to use before we even think of how to do it. And we see a lot of creators starting to integrate AI into their content creation processes. I think we're really at the beginning stages of that. Generative AI, large language models are not the end state of where the AI moment ends up. They're just the beginning. And they're relatively basic compared to what will come next. But we're seeing influencers start to integrate that into their processes, a lot in the editing space. A lot of influencers are using it to catch typos, to write better, to A/B test. Hey, I wrote this tweet. Give me 3 versions of it. I can A/B test. Things like that.
That's incredible, and I love you anyway because you're such a digital optimist in so many ways. Like you're embracing the future, and in many ways charting the future in this world. So, what is the future really? Where are you going to go next? What's next for Urban Legend? Don't want to give us any sneak
It's
peeks?
not even about sneak peeks, right? It's about this is happening so quickly. And I think a lot of the opportunities we've discovered, a lot of the features we've built because somebody asked for them. A creator would say, hey, it would be really cool if, or a client would say, I really need this as a type of action we can measure. What I love about what we've built is our infrastructure is such that it can scale into all these trends. Fundamentally, we have a platform that connects influencers to causes they care about. Those influencers get their audience to then do something. That something will evolve. Download an app, sign up for an event, sign a petition, watch a video, click to a landing page, read an op-ed. Those actions will continue to become increasingly sophisticated. But the model is fundamentally the same. And it's what the model should have been for advertising all along, which is measure what the audience did, not how many people saw it, not impressions, not reach, not GRPs, results.
Yeah, getting away from the vanity measures
Mm-hmm.
and getting to the heart of this is what I'm accomplishing.
Mm-hmm.
I love that. How many creators do you have in your network right now?
We have about 1,700.
1,700. That is such a labor intensive project to go out and cultivate, isn't it?
No, not when we've found ways to scale it. It's really labor intensive to go out and build one-to-one partnerships with 1,700 creators. And by the way, there are over 2 million professional creators in the US, people who consider themselves creators who make money from social media in some way. We've barely scratched the surface. And we're an invite-only platform. The labor-intensive part is the vetting and making sure that we are picking creators who are brand safe, who are credible in their issue area, and who reflect well on the organizations they work with. And doing that across the political spectrum and outside of politics in an increasingly divisive era. But once a creator is ready to join the platform, that process happens very quickly. They download our app, they create a profile, they're matched to campaigns programmatically. And so we've managed to automate and scale what was previously a very manual process.
I mean, it's an incredibly simple platform. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it's intuitive. I mean, it's basically an iPhone in its simplicity. So, kudos to you for that. It took a lot to do, I know. I actually think that what you've done to vet all of these folks and to make sure that you're sorting them the right way is such a crucial component to what you're offering as a platform. That's why we love working with you guys, and we recommend you guys whenever we are working on various digital campaigns as one of many tools because we think it's a great model. The I think can you tell me a little bit about the verticals which you have the largest footprint in, and how you're divvied up?
Yeah. Healthcare right now is our largest vertical. We're seeing tremendous influencer success in healthcare advocacy, range of issues, patient groups as sponsors of campaigns, healthcare organizations, the groups advocating for everything from rural hospitals to nurses to really kind of any healthcare cause. I think that's because so many influencers care about healthcare and are credible on healthcare. Parenting is a really big vertical for us. Personal finance is a very, very significant vertical. Energy and environment is a big vertical. Creators, left, right. Faith is a massive vertical for us right now. And so creators can be in more than one vertical or issue area. And again, we're tagging them not based on who they are, but based on what they talk about and what areas they're credible in.
And then if we can walk through, just because I'm very familiar with it, and I think we just need to do it in the most simplistic form possible. I want to sign up as a client. I want to work with you. I am working on healthcare. I am working to support. I don't know. Let's call it market-based reforms in healthcare. How then do I come to you and build that? I'm an advocacy organization.
Yeah. I think our first question to you is, what do you want the audience to do?
Okay, bipartisan right now on Capitol Hill is this issue of site neutrality. And it's a complex issue, but I'll try to make it super simple. So you have hospitals who are getting paid back. They get a payment rate back from the government that is higher, right? Higher than an independent doctor by about tenfold in many cases. And so we're saying this service is $30 here. Why is it $300 there for the patient? We should not be spending taxpayer dollars to pay more, right? And it's causing monopolization. So you have everyone from Americans for Prosperity, which I've worked with, to the Arnold Foundation. You have Republican co-sponsors and Democratic co-sponsors on the Hill. But this seems to be moving slowly because we can't actually push things across the board. Doctors are advocating fiercely on it because they want to see this happen. And it'd be a boon. You can save a tremendous amount of money in healthcare. I want to push people to understand and educate them on this issue. Tell me how I do it.
Yeah. So you said understand and educate. And so what you're talking about is building awareness. What you didn't say is contact their lawmaker.
Contact their lawmaker.
Example,
I want them to activate. I want to educate them, activate them, educate them, mobilize them eventually.
Well, I think what our platform brings to life is that those aren't the same thing.
Yeah.
And so often public affairs marketers want ads to do everything, right? And so they'll run a radio spot on WTOP in DC, hoping it reaches a lawmaker, and then they'll end it with contact Congress. And it's like, wait, what? You think somebody driving in the Beltway is going to call a lawmaker? And
they're probably on their way into the office
exactly.
right now.
Right? So it's a mismatch. I think when you run a campaign based on audience actions, it's a forcing mechanism to say, what is the one thing we want the audience to do? I'll give you some examples. Maybe there's a great op-ed about site neutrality that a member company just wrote. And turns out nobody read it because it's an op-ed and nobody reads op-eds. But this one's really, really good. And if only we could get the audience there. Turns out when influencers say, go read this op-ed, they're actually pretty good at getting people to do that. How good? Well, we run a campaign where influencers explain the topic, tell the audience to click to the op-ed to read more, and we pay them based on clicks. Maybe we're a couple of weeks later and now it's time for real advocacy and contacting lawmakers. And so we can run a campaign where influencers urge their audience to contact their lawmakers, and they're paid each time they submit a letter. And so maybe we're starting with awareness, we're moving into advocacy, but in each of those cases, we're picking the one action goal. And really that's what all advertising channels should be doing, having a single thing you want the audience to do, not 4 or 5.
And I love the way you sequenced it. It's perfect. That is exactly the way to think about these campaigns. But too often, we just fail to do that. I think many companies, many organizations fail to kind of think through it. And then you have a robust healthcare kind of influencer content network that has credibility. So it's much easier to kind of get that audience that's already locked in and cares about these issues to just flip the switch and activate them.
Yeah. And so to kind of finish the example, right, let's say the op-ed example on site neutrality, The organization running the campaign would write a creative brief. We'd give them a template, talking points, what to say, what not to say, explanation of the issue, explanation of the organization, disclosure guidelines, anything like that they want to include. They would give us that brief, load it into the system, and then creators are notified. And they're told, hey, new campaign's available in your account. Tell your audience to check out this op-ed. More information is available in the app. The creators seeing that campaign would be the healthcare creators, but maybe creators in, say, the parenting space who can talk credibly about this, or in the news space who can talk credibly about it. They'd opt in if they want to. They ignore it if they don't want to. And we look for an opt-in rate of less than 10%. We want creators being very, very selective. Once they opt in, our platform gives them custom tracking links. Built-in tracking codes are all in there. And then they see the results in real time. And that's really important because if an influencer is going to be paid based on results, they and the advertiser, the organization, everybody needs total transparency about what those are in real time. It also lets the influencer optimize for what's working and what's not. To see, hey, I posted this on Twitter, I got 7 clicks. I put this on Facebook, I got 11. What was different about my message? Nothing really. Let me try something else. And they're learning as they go.
Iterative optimizing over and over and over again. And again, you only, like, you're not paying for the fact that they posted it,
Right.
which is a value in and of itself.
It is.
Because people are reading it, whether they take action on it or not. You mentioned earlier, maybe the content is so good and so engaging that people don't actually engage with it because they think it completed everything that was necessary. But it was still convincing people.
Yeah.
And there's a value in that.
There is. And how much that value is harder to determine. But certainly, this is not ever, influencers are never going to be the lowest cost channel to, say, drive traffic to an op-ed.
Yeah.
You can buy cheaper traffic on Outbrain and Taboola, but that's not going to drive the level of quality audience. And that conversation, engagement, brand lift, awareness you're talking about is kind of built into the model.
We're going to transfer topics just a little bit because we worked on something I was really passionate about, the NCAA's name, image, and likeness. This allowed players, athletes, college athletes who were previously prohibited from collecting any money from sponsors or boosters or the school. If they did that, they were in direct violation of the NCAA, and they were pretty severe consequences. I think about I watched the ESPN 30 under 30 the other day, and it was Maurice Clarett. You remember him, Ohio State running back, had this amazing first year at Ohio State, and then got hit with the fact that he was driving a car. It wasn't like a super fancy car, but it was a loaner car. And they were like, oh, that can't be your car. And so he got hit NCAA violations. And his career just like fizzled out, and he's using his God-given talents to try to get a leg up. And so we supported name, image, and likeness, saying, hey, it's arbitrary. Like, why are we keeping people from benefiting off of what good they bring? And there was a lot of concern, like, oh my goodness, all of these like male top tier athletes are going to do really well and women aren't going to do well, and there's all these back and forth. But what we've seen is actually women athletes have done tremendously well. Part of that, at least the hypothesis around it, is that they've curated really good brands. They're safer brands than some 19-year-old athlete male athlete who might be making a little less mature,
stupid decisions on social sometimes. Yeah. Yeah. And look, I think college kids, some have great content, some have less great content. Our top college influencer right now is a D1 women's soccer player. And when I say top influencer, I mean in terms of the audience engagement she drives. She's been an advocate on healthcare issues, on most recently an issue around some product safety concerns around a particular chemical, all kinds of things like that in the wellness space and the fitness space. Turns out her audience listens to her. And what I think is powerful about these changes is that they let athletes, not just, SEC athletes, but, people who aren't necessarily playing in the most public of sports and the most attention-grabbing situations, reach their own audience and be compensated for it, right? And everybody talks about how all the money flows to football. This is spreading the wealth a little.
Yeah, no, I think it's great because it really does empower a lot of these college athletes, and it teaches them some great principles. A lot of them go in and do sports and marketing
Mm-hmm.
careers anyway, and this is kind of a training ground for them for that next level. I I'm I'm just curious, like how many college athletes do you have on the platform right now? Do
Couple
you
of hundred.
a couple hundred?
Yeah.
So I think this is like a tremendous boon because many of these college athletes have no idea right now how to manage this process. They have managers that may give them good or bad advice because they just don't understand the real reputational risks, the brand kind of affinity for their athletes, how to marry them and match them to causes like the soccer player that they actually care about. And your platform does all of that.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, there are more lucrative opportunities out there. Energy drinks, for example. A lot of clothing brands and travel deals and crypto deals and things like that that are targeting college kids and working with college athletes and are willing to pay a lot of money up front. And for a college kid who wants to make that money very quickly, that's a good opportunity. Our platform is not the most lucrative solution for them. It's a way for them to make some money while talking about things they actually care about and that are brand safe and are going to preserve their opportunities down the line and not lead to them maybe promoting something they shouldn't.
Yeah, I think about kind of the boxing world where they were getting tattoos on the forehead and stuff, right before because they were trying to sponsor some energy drink or something. I love what you're doing. I love kind of the vision that you set out with. I'm excited to see what's next for you guys. I think the platform has a lot of utility well beyond the public communication of advocacy or public affairs or even sales. But I think there's also opportunity, and I've shared this with you before, and like internal communications because you're often trying to figure out ways to how do you communicate one another, share stories internally with your big staff if you have a big staff. How do you incentivize people to share job postings and things like that? Which as the HR people I've hired and many staff over the years, and HR people are always like the best candidates always come from our team sharing these things because their social network tend to have more aligned viewpoints and character skills and then tend to do well in our environment, like in our company. So our employees recruit the best employees. I think there's tremendous opportunity there. I'm going to keep pushing you on those things, but I'm excited to see what's next. I thank you for your time today, and I hope you'll keep us posted on what's going on.
Thank you for having me. This was great.
Any last words for us? Any last nuggets?
I mean, you're becoming an influencer now too, right? That's what this is. That's what this podcast is. It's a chance for you to get your message out, to connect your audience with interesting people. I know some of the guests you've had on are incredible, and to build an audience. So congratulations on joining the influencer economy.
Well, thank you so much. I just want to caution everyone because it's really, I think it's great. You get your voice out there, you elevate it. You can advocate for the causes and beliefs you care about. You can reach the target audiences you want. But let's never lose sight that the places that we have the most influence are in our homes, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, in a community. Those are the places where our influences really matter. And so, holding ourselves to high standards there and making sure that we don't lose the influence that matters most because we're seeking some glory. Sure. I'm not doing that.
Agreed.
But so thank you for your time. And we had another great episode of Game Plan today. Ori, awesome. Kudos to you and the team. I look forward to working with you guys more. And we'll have you back here in the next couple days for another episode of Game Plan. I hope you'll like, subscribe, share, give us feedback. What do you want to hear more about?